Hi guys, what's happening to the NHS is by design. The Tories over the last 12 years have run it into the ground. But while Brexit supporters sold the public the massive lie on the side of a big red bus about how they would fund the NHS with £350 million a week of money clawed back from the EU, we've been hearing for years how the health service is broken and needs to be quote-unquote reformed. Reform is code word for privatisation, and as one pillar of Brexit was disaster capitalism, we are likely to see those in charge convince the public that a private system is the way to go. I want you to listen to someone who was described by Brexiteers as a scaremonger following this interview he gave back in 2016. This is what former Prime Minister Sir John Major warned about back around the time of the Brexit vote. It's quite chilling.
What they have said about leaving is fundamentally dishonest, and it's dishonest about the cost of Europe. And on the subject that they've veered towards, having lost the economic argument of immigration, I think their campaign is verging on the squalid. But I think what they have done now they have begun the campaign is to feed out to the British people a whole galaxy of inaccurate and frankly untrue information. I mean, the concept that the people running the Brexit campaign would care for the National Health Service is a rather odd one. I seem to remember, well, Michael Gove wanted to privatise it, Boris wanted to charge people for using it, and Ian Duncan Smith wanted a social insurance system. The NHS is about as safe with them as a pet hamster would be with an hungry python. I am angry at the way the British people are being misled. This is much more important than a general election. This is going to affect people, their livelihoods, their future, for a very long time to come.
And he's completely correct. And as we're hearing when it comes to the NHS, it's continually the NHS needs to be reformed. And unfortunately, we're hearing it not just from the Tories, but we're also hearing it from the Labour Party. Wes Streeting a few weeks ago and a few days ago was talking about how the NHS needs to reform or it will die. And reform is obviously privatisation. Because the NHS is not broken, it's been undermined. The NHS needs funding and it needs staff. It's not the NHS's fault. It's not something within the system that needs to be reformed. It's the people who are in charge, ultimately, the Health Secretary and the Prime Minister, who decide if the NHS lives or dies. And John Major was completely correct when he said about, back in 2016, about how the Brexiteers have no care for the NHS. They want to see it privatised. Why? Part of it is obviously ideological. They don't like the idea of a large state. They don't like the idea of the government running things. They prefer the private sector to do it. And second, of course, is corruption. We've seen with the PPE contracts. We've seen with the VIP fast lane. This is about handing over vast amounts of money, taxpayer money, to the private sector, be it people who donate to the party or people who are connected to it in some way, or it is some type of lobbying that's taking place where whoever eventually delivers the contracts will be given a cushy job in the private sector when they lose their seat. And as John has said here, this is going to cause long-term damage. As we've seen with the privatization of the NHS, it's also affecting businesses. But coming back to the NHS, what needs to happen is whoever's going to take over needs to fully invest in the NHS, provide it with the staff it needs. And of course, it's connected with Brexit in the sense that freedom of movement needs to be brought back in some form. The freedom of movement for British people may never return, but in order for the NHS and the care sector to operate to the best of its ability, it needs staff, and you need to bring in staff from abroad, and you need to be able to bring them in as quickly as possible. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.